tried to guilt my ex into coming back after cheating. He saw through it and cut me off for good. I tried to make him come back to me. I wanted Chris back, and I resorted to the most manipulative act, and now I regret it so much. Fair warning, Redditors. I had some cheap whiskey before I started writing this post, so please bear with me. He realized that was exactly what I was trying to do, and he cut me off, for good this time. It's so painful knowing that even though I hurt him, I still at least had the opportunity to get to see him. But now I have absolutely no idea where he is and how he's doing or who he's with, and it's driving me totally crazy. It's been a month already, and I just know that this is it this time. I will never get to see Chris ever again. Or our daughter. Chris and I were married for 5 years, and we were lovers throughout our university days. We had our daughter before we got married, and she was 3 years old when we eventually did. I got pregnant with our daughter when I was in my second year of university, and instead of getting rid of her, Chris had insisted that we kept the baby. It was the best decision because I got ill after a year of her birth and had some complications that resulted in an operation which rendered me incapable of having any more kids. Chris didn't mind that we couldn't have any more kids, though. He had been supportive all the way through. I never had to doubt his love for me. He was constant and unwavering in his love for me, and it was just so amazing. Everybody else, our friends, our families, envied our love and always thought that we'd be together till the end of time, and to be honest, at one point of my life, I thought so too. In fact, I was so certain of the fact that there was nothing that could ever stop Chris from loving me as much as he did so much, so that I started to take advantage of his love and I did whatever I wanted, and now, here I am, with consequences so big, it would last me a lifetime, and I still will never recover from it. We didn't get married immediately after I confirmed that I was pregnant with Charlie, our baby, because my parents, who had been disappointed at first, insisted that we finish our university education while still being sponsored by them, and then if we still wanted to be together, we had our choices. Chris agreed, even though I was furious, because I just wanted to be married to him. But he assured me that we would always be together, and had even gone ahead to prove it by begging my parents to allow us to live together, while promising that he wouldn't impregnate me again until we were married, and with jobs to sustain our little family. Because of my illness, which took a whole year to recover fully, I had to pause my academics that year to focus on recovering, and so Chris graduated a year earlier than I did, and because of how bright he is, he got a job almost immediately and became responsible for our little family. By the time I was done with school, all I just wanted to do was bond with our baby and also get married, and we finally did get married. I thought everything was perfect the way it was. I had my dream man, my perfect little princess, and my amazing job that came with so many opportunities. There was nothing more I could ask for. Except over the years, like I said before, I took advantage of the one thing I should have cherished the most in my life. Chris's love and attention. I cheated. I cheated on Chris, and he found out about it, with a guy named Mark. I met Mark at work. He was fun, flirty, and easy on the eyes, too. He, of course, had many female crushes around the office, and originally I thought myself immune to his charms, but I guess I was too confident about it and just totally lost. I wish I could say that there was something wrong with our marriage. I wish that I could give that excuse as my reason for cheating on Chris, but it isn't so. I really had no excuse to cheat. Chris was still the same man I knew while we just started dating. He made sure our relationship worked because of how intentional he is. But I let my greed and selfishness lead me into destruction. Like I said before, I never really noticed Mark, apart from feeling irritated by the number of fans he apparently had amongst our colleagues. But then, we got assigned to work together on a particular project, and it made Mark and I get close, and I began to really see Mark in a different light. Mark was nothing like Chris, but yet I found myself intrigued by him to the point where I started to just develop feelings for him. Not love. I knew it wasn't love, but lust. I started to find his not-so-necessary muscles bulged from his rolled sleeves while he worked on our project. Extremely sexy, especially in the evenings when we were all alone at the office. And his flirting, which used to be terribly annoying, started to make me blush hard. I found myself starting to dress even better to work. Or should I say more like the other ladies whom I had always condemned in my mind for their choices of dressing. I wore clothes that revealed the bulge of my breast, and the length of it short enough to reveal my mid-thighs when I sat or bent to pick up anything, and instead of my usual shade of pink lipstick that looked almost invisible on my lips, I wore a bright shade of red lipstick to work. If Chris noticed anything about my behavior, he said nothing. Only made a few not-so-offensive comments about my recent need to dress to fit the trend, but I had of course turned it into an argument that made me ignore him for days, despite his several attempts to work things out between us. The truth was, I started to get really irritated by Chris, and it was all because he was just too perfect. I know how weird and horrible that sounds now, but he was just too perfect, and it annoyed me. He didn't have visible flaws like Mark did. He was the perfect husband and father to our daughter, and it made me feel jealous if I'm being honest. I was jealous of how he didn't have something that made him not so perfect. Mark, of course, used to female attention, noticed my sudden interest in him, and he took advantage of it. Started to compliment my dresses and told me how much he loved older women whenever we decided to take a break from work with a glass of wine, which was usually his idea. He would tell me that he had a female colleague he was interested in, but she was married and he didn't know how to approach her. I knew he was speaking about me. There were only 3 married women at work, and one of them was as old as my mother, although the other one had just gotten married recently. I knew he couldn't be talking about her. I convinced myself that Mark was in love with me and was only restraining himself because I had always bragged about my perfect marriage at work. So I did the most stupid thing ever, and I had taken the bold step. I made the first move on Mark. I kissed him that evening at work while everyone else had gone home, and we had to do the final edits to the project we were working on together. I had been desperate because I knew that after that night, and then the next morning that we had to present to the board together, we might never get a chance to be close again since we worked in different departments. So I kissed Mark on the lips while we were on our little break again, and he spoke about the married woman he was interested in. Of course, having gotten a go-ahead like that from me, Mark wasted no time in kissing me back and ripping off my clothes right there in the office on the single coach in there. I didn't even mind how uncomfortable it had been, having to have sex on a couch that could barely contain one person lying on it. Talk less of 2, but somehow Mark had managed to make it work. I didn't think anything of our actions until we were done. Not even when he brought out the condom from his pocket and used it before we continued. There was no foreplay or even an afterplay during the whole thing. Just raw pleasure, and that was it. Very different from what I had always had with Chris, who ensured that he got me in the mood before anything happened, and then the kisses, dinner, breakfast, or lunch in bed afterwards too to appreciate me. Sex with Mark was nothing like that. It was just purely lust with no iota of love in it, but for some weird reason, I found myself thinking about it so often that a repeat happened after a week of the first one. I had been the one to make the first move again this time by being so bold as to get a hotel room booked, and then texted Mark the address with a picture of me naked from above my waist. Mark, as he had done the first time, needed no further prompting and had shown up in the hotel, and we had a fun time together. And I went back home pretending nothing had happened, like I hadn't just cheated on my husband. Mark and I slept together for about another month, and each time it had to be prompted by me. Mark never initiated anything. I was the one always running after him because of how good he made me feel sexually. I literally became so obsessed that I kept spending all my money on hotel rooms, so I got to spend time with Mark. And by time, I meant to have plenty of sex. It was affecting my home, and I had no idea. I thought I was handling everything perfectly fine, and that Chris had no idea that I was cheating. He must have noticed from the way I kept on lying about stressful days at work and avoiding sex with him. Perhaps it was the sudden need to work on weekends to meet with deadlines that gave it away. I didn't know Chris had suspected me enough to have checked through my messages. Chris had never doubted me before, and had never gone through my phone before, and because of that, I was so confident I would never get caught, and I just never deleted anything, and forgot that Chris knew my password. I still remember that day that Chris had opened the bathroom door without caring to knock first like he always did, with my phone in his hand and his eyes blazing with red anger, demanding to know who Mark was. I was so shocked that I couldn't say anything for a moment. I couldn't believe that Chris had gone through my phone, or had even seen all of the nudes I sent to Mark, when I wanted to give him a taste of what was coming whenever we couldn't meet up. All the evidence of my affair was clearly on that chat, and there was nothing I could say to defend myself. So I started crying and begging for Chris to hear me out. But he was so angry and had chased me out of the house. It was my first time seeing Chris so angry, and I was so scared. Luckily, our daughter had been at her grandmother's place, Chris's mother, and didn't witness the whole thing. Chris locked me out of the house and refused to let me in, and I was barely clad in a bathroom robe. I didn't know what to do. My sin was catching up to me, and I was honestly clueless on what to do. After hours of standing outside and realizing that Chris had no intention of allowing me into the house that day, I went over to a friend's place which was close by. I will not even begin to talk about the embarrassing stares I got for walking on the road with a bathroom robe on and slippers. When I finally got to my friend's place, she gave me her clothes to wear, and she allowed me to stay the night when I fed her lies about my husband and our daughter spending the night at his mother's place and me locking myself out of the house. I kept texting and calling Chris, but he wouldn't even answer or reply to my texts. I really began to panic, especially the next day when I borrowed some money from my friend to go to my mom's place, and she hadn't been so welcoming. She told me that Chris had told them everything and that she wanted nothing to do with me anymore. Begging wasn't even an option because I knew how hard-headed my mom is, so I left and came back home hoping that Chris would have had time to cool off, but then I found my luggage in the garage with a letter on it. Long story short, time passed by so quickly, and within a month of the court case, when I refused to sign the divorce papers, I was officially divorced and had no parental rights over our daughter. But then, when I thought everything was over, Chris decided to give me a second chance. Not to be with him, but to be able to see our daughter. He said he didn't want our divorce ruining Charlie's life, and although he wanted nothing to do with me, he wanted me to be present in Charlie's, but under his watch. I was so happy and glad for the opportunity, and I eventually misused it again. I managed to delude myself into believing that even though he said he hated me, he didn't hate me as much as he said. I thought he still loved me and was only punishing me for what I did to him, so I tried as hard as I could to get back with him. I wanted Chris back so much and so desperately, and when I kept trying everything else and it didn't work, I resulted in guilt-tripping him, but that was the worst decision I could have ever made. I would spend the night at the house pretending like I slept off while reading Charlie a book to put her to sleep. I did this for a week, and when Chris said nothing about it, I started to get really comfortable. I even secretly put some of my clothes in the house so I didn't have to come and go from that horrible house of mine. If Chris knew anything about that, he said nothing. I was settling back into my usual routine. I even overdid things this time. I would get up early to make Charlie and Chris breakfast in the morning. Although Chris never ate my food, he made no complaint seeing our daughter do so. I wave them goodbye and pretend to go take a bath to leave too. But I just stay in the house and hang around until they come back, and when they do, I pretended like I was just coming around too. I thought that Chris was getting very comfortable around me since he said nothing about my behavior, so I tried to seduce him. I went to his room one night pretending to be so hot in my nightdress and tried to get him to sleep with me, but Chris had been so angry and had ordered me out of his room. I apologized to him the next morning so that he wouldn't kick me out, and Chris said nothing. I thought I was safe again, and instead of just stopping and just enjoying those precious moments I got to see them for after everything I had done, I kept plotting different means to get us back together. I wasn't even focusing on Charlie anymore. All I wanted was to be back in the house as Chris's wife, without having to make an excuse to be there. And then I guess I finally pushed Chris to the wall with my last attempt. I started to project our daughter on Chris. I used the weapon of guilt. I knew that every young girl's dream would be to have her mommy and daddy together, and happy, like in the fairy tale they read. So I started to whisper it into Charlie's ears. I would tell her about the things she could have if only her dad and I weren't separated, and that I didn't live apart from her. I would whisper about all the fun things we could do as a family if her daddy wasn't so mad at me. I would tell her just how sad I was that things weren't going so well between her daddy and I, and how much I wished for it to be so. Charlie had of course believed me, and didn't realize that I was trying to take advantage of her love for me as her mother. I try hard not to wonder how much she will come to hate me when she realizes what I had been doing all those years, but it's all I can think of. How stupid I had been to take advantage of her and her dad the way I had done. I wish I knew better then, so I wouldn't have made the mistakes that I did. But sadly I didn't. I was just selfish, and too stupid to see I was ruining my life in the process. I kept telling Charlie these things, and of course she began to tell her daddy how much she wished Mummy lived with them again permanently. She would tell her daddy to forgive me so we could be happy again. When I saw that Chris said nothing whenever his daughter told him these things, I saw an opportunity instead of a doom that was already set in place for me. I went into his room again that night, and I had slept off again. I tried to seduce him again, but Chris had been even angrier when he saw me completely naked and trying to maneuver him out of his clothes. He pushed me away and had angrily told me to get out, but instead of going away as I had done the first time, I went on my knees and started crying, begging him for a second chance. I told him that Charlie needed her mother and that the changes were affecting her. I told him that me having to come and go would affect our daughter's stability even further if he didn't take me back. I told him that if he wanted the best for our daughter, he would have to consider getting married again, and who better than her mother, who was there and willing to make things work again. Chris said nothing to me as I kept trying to guilt trip him into letting me back in after everything I did. Eventually, he asked me to leave his room, but I left after still repeating just how perfect it would be if a child didn't lose the chance to be with both her parents like he had. The next day, Chris acted like nothing had gone on in his room the night before. He even sat at the table with us for breakfast, and even though he ate nothing or said nothing but sipped his morning coffee and waited for his daughter to eat so he could drop her off at school, I was very happy. I thought it meant that I had finally managed to wove my way into his heart again. I thought it meant my plan worked and that I could start to relax. In my head, soon enough, Chris would ask that we got married again. I even imagined telling him that I would want a small wedding this time, just him and I present. And because of how overly excited I became, instead of hanging around the house until they were both back, I went back to my apartment that day to get my things. I was so certain that with a little more pushing, Chris would finally give in and we would be together as a happy family once again. But little did I know that I was in for a big shock the very next day. I just came to the house as usual that morning, but the house was locked. There was a new lock that wasn't there the night before, and I didn't understand what was happening. I rang the doorbell for over 30 minutes and got no response. Chris's car wasn't in the garage, which meant he was out, but it was odd. Knowing Chris as much as I thought I did, Chris never went out on weekends except if it was a work emergency, and he would have called me and told me to watch Charlie, or even tell me beforehand that he was leaving, but I got nothing. I tried calling him, but shockingly his number was out of service, and I was shocked. I texted him, but it wouldn't go through. I thought that maybe I was just overthinking things, but by evening, and I still kept hearing nothing, I started to panic. For 3 days straight, I kept going back to the house, expecting that Chris would be back home each time, only to be met with nothing but silence. I tried seeking him out at his place of work, but they only told me that he got transferred out, but wouldn't tell me where or when he got it. I had even at first believed that his company was the one at fault. I thought that they must have forced him to go there so he wouldn't lose his job. But after 2 weeks, it became evidently clear that Chris had planned everything. A company couldn't just order you to leave your present life and move somewhere else without at least a month's notice. He had known all along that he was leaving me behind, and he kept quiet about it. While I thought that I was finally weaving my way back into his life, Chris was planning to abandon me completely with no means whatsoever of reaching him. It doesn't even help matters that my parents seemed to be in contact with their granddaughter, and I wasn't. They didn't seem shocked when I showed up at their door, crying and begging them to find Chris with me, when I was first convinced that he was kidnapped and needed rescuing. They didn't sound surprised that he wasn't home or any of the other places I knew him to frequent. My mom had only said that I made my bed, and now I had to lie on it before asking me to leave her house, while my dad said nothing, of course supporting his wife's words, and Chris's decision too. It hurts so bad, knowing that this is the end of it for me. I've lost everything, not just once, but twice, and I don't think I could ever recover from a loss this massive ever again. I'm left in shambles, and with only memories of how perfect things were before I ruined it with my greed and selfishness.